Should you apply for grad school for composition? And what does that even mean? What does that even look like? This is the second part. This is the part 2 of a two-part video about applying for music school, specifically for composer people. So if you are looking into undergrad or anything like that, that's going to be in part 1. That's basically the entire thing. I have that linked below. And I recommend, even if you are watching that, if you just finished watching that first video of undergrad, to continue watching through this, because one of the things that I had a real struggle with was not having a clear idea of the full direction of where I wanted to go. Like, I wasn't thinking about grad school. That wasn't even on my horizons at all when I was in undergrad. It's worth just having some of these ideas in the back of your mind cooking. Even if you were a high school junior and you're just thinking about this, it's just a good idea to just have it there in the background. This is a focus on grad school. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the two kind of different paths that you would take, either the master's degree in grad school or the PhD/DMA route. They're two very different ball games, despite being fairly similar in a lot of ways. And then at the end, I'm going to share my thoughts about what I think that music school does very well and what I think it really sucks at and what I wish people had told me before. And I will answer the question, at least from my perspective, is it worth it? Is it worth doing it? I'm not, in this part of the video, I'm not really going to be talking about letters of recommendation. I'm not going to be talking about the audition process, applications, or any types to do with portfolio. I've kind of already done that in part 1. So if you're interested in those things, I have all of those linked below, and you can go exactly to the information that you need. Grad school looks quite a bit different than undergrad. There's really kind of two tracks that you can go. There's the master's degree and the doctorate degree. So a master's degree, generally speaking, is usually what's next right after an undergraduate experience. This is usually a 2-year degree, but there are, an increasing amount of like single-year degrees or even like 3, but it's about half the time of an undergraduate degree. Now, what's interesting about a master's degree is that they often offer a very like specialized approach, where undergrad is kind of giving you a solid foundation and things. A master's degree understands that you already have that foundation, and it's about really solidifying the things that you need to step into the professional world. For a long time, like, there are many film scoring things that are only really offered at the master's level. This is different now, of course. This has changed, and that's a good thing. We want more of that. A master's is where you could really kind of like pick a specialization and go for it. You also find even more programs that are even more specialized in different genres. Like, there are, I know NYU has that like specialization in like musical theater writing, and I know that there's stuff out in the UK that have a focus on like opera writing, and I'm sure there's all, like, I don't know all of those. There's all kinds of different programs that are more tailored to specific genres and things like that. So a master's degree is kind of fun in that way. So you have your specialization in concert world, just like you normally would. The regular composition degree, concert, whatever, jazz. There are also some that are songwriting and production and film scoring, of course. One of the things that you want to keep in mind for a master's degree is that there's actually several different approaches. One is that you might be able, for the first time, to be able to get an assistantship. Not every school is going to have an assistantship. Generally speaking, an assistantship is where you do some type of, either it's usually teaching, like teaching some type of class, or assisting the teacher in teaching a class, or doing like clerical work. It just depends. Every school does it differently. And it's usually either for a tuition waiver, which means that you don't have to pay to go to the school, which is great. And then sometimes you might even get the added bonus of having like a stipend. Like, oh, okay, we'll pay you $12,000 to go to whatever school. And some master's degrees will offer that. It tends to be less of a thing for undergrad. I don't think that that's really a standard thing, but for grad school it is, and you can get that in master's degrees. There is a very real possibility you could get a TA-ship and go somewhere and it be paid for, or mostly paid for, or whatever. Again, every school does it differently, painting with a broad brush here. But there's also something to be said for your master's degree being the degree that you save up for. If you were someone who, did like a state school, that you weren't as excited about for your undergrad, but you've been really thinking about, man, I really want to go to Juilliard, or I really want to go to whatever, like that might be the one to say, all right, I'm gonna spend a little money on this. This is my like thing that I'm gonna do. I see people do that, and I think that there's something to be said for it. Something that's really important about the assistantship thing, though, to keep in mind is that the year that you apply is extremely important. And that's because, people have assistantships at whatever school, and depending on how many people came in the previous year or whatever, how many openings there are, it's going to greatly increase or decrease your chances of getting an assistantship. The year that I applied to University of Miami, I was glad that I got the assistantship and I was able to go and be a theory TA. Awesome. I love it. It also helped that there were several openings that year. I felt really bad for the people who came the year after me. It doesn't really matter how good of music you can write if there's only one slot that is open, which that's what it was. It was a single slot that was left open. That's all you can really apply for. And they're not going to advertise it. They're not going to put that on their website. Hey, we only have the one, because that's not an incentive for them. Just keep that in mind, that sometimes you can get rejected in these sort of things, and it has literally nothing to do with the quality of your music, or that you don't get the TA-ship. It sometimes just is literally the availability. Do they even have enough to give out that particular year? What a master's degree is for stepping into the professional world. That's really what it's about. It's about learning the essential skills that you will need in whatever facet that you're working on, whether it's concert or film music, jazz, whatever. It's about honing in on your strengths, where undergrad is a little bit more about trying different things, and I'm going to do this choir for the first time, and I'm going to do electronics for the first time. Here it's like, okay, you want to have a voice, and you want to find, this is my angle that I'm working in. I work in the choral world, and I work in the opera world, or whatever. If you have an undergrad, if you did 4 years of a bachelor's degree in composition, you're going to be farther along on your journey than someone who hasn't done that. And so your master's degree might very well be the place that you get to say, all right, I'm really focused on this world, I'm focused on that. But that doesn't mean that you don't want to try things. It doesn't mean that you don't want to still explore. But if you're someone like me who didn't have an undergrad in composition and switched in, you kind of had to learn how to get into this whole writing music business and making, how do I finish a piece, and how do I do all these different things. So what I would say with this is that really what you want to focus on, whether you really do have a clear idea of I want to do this, or you're still kind of unsure, I don't really know where I want to go just yet. The focus should be, especially at the master's degree, is writing as much music as humanly possible. That's what you want to do. Spend as much time writing, and ideally over-delivering on every project. You've got this string quartet. You didn't just write a string quartet. You put everything that you had on the line to go for it. You got this film score thing. You didn't just write it and be done with it. You really tried to make the director as happy as you possibly can. Whatever it is, you want it, the trick should be to over-deliver and write as much as you possibly can. Not because all of your pieces are going to be amazing and fantastic. They likely won't be. But you will be a better composer, and you'll have better habits because you've taken the time to focus on this, to focus on finishing pieces and shipping them and getting them out there. So that's what I would say is the real thing about this, is if you're in the voice conversation, wonderful. That's great for you, and focus on that and keep doing it. And if you're not, this is how you move forward. Focus on writing as much as you humanly can. I honestly wrote more in my master's degree than I have in my DMA so far. And that's primarily because DMAs have a different kind of research component than a master's degree, so that's not incredibly uncommon. Write a ton. Get out there and just do it. That's what you want to focus on. It's also about building a strong network of colleagues and teachers, people that that are going to be in the industry that you can connect with, that you can rely on, so that when you encounter problems, hey, what did you do when write a contract for the first time? Hey, what did you do when someone asked you for a commission? How did you price yourself? How much do you charge when someone asks you for a lesson? It's all these things that don't get talked about, and it's good to have people that that will help you with it. Some of the ideas that I wish I had more thoroughly considered when I was thinking about a master's is, one, following the assistantship route, which I've gone into detail with. 2, aiming really high. You definitely want to have some reach schools that you were going for that, you're not quite sure you're at the level or whatever. Go for it to see what happens. You never know what they're looking for. You never know how you might fit in. It's so easy for us to count ourselves out I'm not good enough. And then you never know. You never know what they see in you. So definitely having reach schools to apply to. But something that I also see that I think doesn't get mentioned is that, because a master's is so short, doing something really kind of crazy and leaving the U.S. if you're based in the U.S. the whole time and going to somewhere like Europe. I've had friends who go and have gotten master's degrees in Germany, and I've been very envious of that, because you get to really solidify your language skills, experience a different culture and see just a different part of the world. I think that's a very cool thing, and there's so many places to look at, and there's many of these have a much more affordable system than what we have here in the U.S. It's just worth thinking about. If I could go back in time, I wish I had even looked in that direction. It just wasn't really on my radar. Now, the other thing is, if you're going to go for a master's degree, you want to, just to keep this in mind, maybe consider places that don't have a doctoral component. That was something I got to do at Boston Conservatory that I really, really appreciated about it. Is you're not, as a master's student, if you're in a place that also has doctoral students, you're kind of the second tier in a way. Obviously, not exactly, but they're kind of the top dog. And when there's no doctoral component, you are the top dog. There's something to be said for that. Like, it's really nice when you are when you get like first pick for everything. Oh, there's less competition for when a guest composer comes. You get to have a lesson. Or when there's a selection for different prizes that are run by the competitions for the school, different readings. It's something to consider, that going to a place that only offers undergrad and masters can be very strategic and very advantageous for you. Now, there is one myth that I want to dispel about teaching with a master's degree, which is that, can you teach with a master's degree? Generally speaking, people will say, no, you got to have the doctorate. And that's partially true and partially false. On the one hand, you can teach with just a master's. I know, because I've done that. When I got to teach at Bridgewater State University a few years ago, which was awesome and wonderful, I only had a master's degree. Like, I'm still working on my doctorate at the time of making this video. But what is true is that I was never going to be eligible for full-time work without that doctorate. So it's just worth keeping in mind that, like, you can maybe get some adjunct stuff, but to get the full-time, to get the real deal, the solidified, tenure track or whatever, they really are going to want you to have a doctorate degree. That is true. I can say that from experience. Not to say that there aren't some oddballs out there who don't have it. Sure, there are a couple, but generally speaking, they don't really have an incentive to pick you with just a master's over someone who has a doctorate, and they're going to have more experience. So that's really the master's degree. Let's talk about the doctorate degree. Okay, so this one should be right off the bat very clear. You should really only be considering this type of degree if you're interested in teaching at the academic level. Like, that's really what it's for. You don't necessarily have to have a doctoral degree to do any type of writing music. It certainly is helpful. It's not a bad thing, but it's not like a requirement. So many people often will get the master's and then be done. It also should be worth noting that you don't have to have a master's to get a doctorate. It is certainly helpful, but I know a couple people who've gone straight from undergrad and then they go straight into PhD doctoral work. Hard, but if you can do it, that's cool. Now, what makes a doctorate degree different, there's really kind of two main tracks here. There's the DMA, which is the Doctor of Musical Arts, and then there is the PhD. Ultimately, they're kind of the same thing. As a general rule, DMAs tend to be more creative focused, like a DMA program's usually their culmination project is going to be some type of like big piece, whereas a PhD, that you'll have that, but you might also have like a larger research component with that. It just kind of depends. At the end of the day, you get called doctor, and it's the same access. Like, there's not, one isn't inherently better than the other. PhDs tend to be a little bit more rigorous on the research side, but that's, again, every school is going to approach it differently, so I'm painting with a broad brush. What's funny about this is that there are different concentrations that are allowed at the doctoral level. There is, of course, the concert thing that we have talked about that's been available on all things. There is a jazz concentration for doctorate, but funnily enough, there isn't the same sort of acceptance in the media world. Generally speaking, for like film composers, the master's degree is kind of like the highest degree. There isn't currently like a real and true DMA / PhD or whatever focused on film scoring. It certainly can study that like as part of like your research and everything, but it's not like the same thing as like getting a master's in it. There are a couple places that say that you can do that. I don't know how in depth that is. I do think that's going to be something that happens in the next 10 years, that you're going to see an opening for that. I don't think that there's necessarily demand from the industry. Like, directors don't need their composers to be doctors, but I think that there's a lot of composers who are interested in going at that higher level. There's also other options too, like you can get your doctorate in music theory. There's some master's programs for that too, but some people find that's really a nice focus, or musicology or whatever. There's all kinds of different things that are available. Doctoral degrees are also usually will have some type of assistantship. They might not have enough to cover everyone in the thing, but there is that kind of option there, and primarily because it's preparing you for an academic life, which is teaching, right? So if there's a degree that you want to get paid for or mostly paid for, it's really the doctorate. It's really hard. It can be really hard to get an assistantship for your master's. It can be really hard to get like a full ride for your undergrad, but there's more availability for some type of stipend help with a doctorate than there is any other degree. Right, so it's really for academia, and there's a stronger emphasis on the doctoral degree for research than there is anything else. Like, I'm kind of, I don't really quite know that going in. I knew it was about, academic teaching, but there's a lot more research components to this than I was anticipating when I walked in. Now, it is about the preparing for the professional world. That's kind of like a given. It kind of amplifies the things that you have done if you did do a master's degree. But it is very much about having a network of teachers. And that's really like a big focus of it. There's a huge push to write a theory paper for a conference, or do a talk or a lecture or something at that. Like that's kind of like a different focus. It's a different part of the doctoral experience than what you really see in, like, at least what I saw at like a master's degree. The shortest I've seen is a doctoral degree in 3 years. They're generally 4 years. Often they can be 5 or more, depending on the type of program. There's a lot of flexibility at this level, so it's just worth keeping in mind. What is a doctorate for? Well, earlier I had said that it's really for teaching, and that is true. It is primarily to get you set for an academic degree. But I think there's a little more to it, and I want to expand on that. One of the things that you have to realize, and this is where I'm at. I'm in a doctorate degree. As I'm making this, I'm looking at my last year of school as like a student person. So this is where I'm at, and this is what has been helpful to me, and so I hope it is helpful to you if this is the place that you get to. Understanding that your faculty members are the gatekeepers. Whether you like it or not, whether it sucks or not, whatever, that's the truth. They are the gatekeepers. And so you need to understand that everything that you do in front of them is a mini job audition, or job opportunity or job interview. Every little thing. Oh, you're presenting, in this particular class and the faculty are going to be there. That's a job interview. It's not going to say that. There's no application. There's no things like that. But you are cementing yourself in their mind as someone who is responsible, someone who does good work, someone who is trustworthy, and someone who respects the classroom and respects the tradition. That's what you want to think about as you walk in. It is very easy for some of those, composition workshop things to be like, all right, it's Friday, I'm worn out, and I just got to show up and turn this in. It's another way of thinking of it as this is part of a job interview, and this is me showing what I'm capable of. You want to be the latter. You want to focus on that. You want to show them that you do have the skill and that you do care about this. You want to treat every opportunity in a DMA or a PhD that has you in front of the classroom, which ideally will be a lot because that's, ideally part of a TA-ship or whatever. You want to be as prepared as possible. You want to really think of it from that lens. Think of it this way, like you don't dress for the job you have, you dress for the job you want. And if your goal is to be a music professor, you kind of need to start putting out those signals that you are ready for it and that's what you want to do. So that's something that I think is very important with it. That, and you also want to continue what we talked about with the master's degree and with the undergrad, which is the over-delivering on things. So, where you would over-deliver in music, you really want to put your all into it, that you're not satisfied with just turning it in and it being okay and being whatever, but that you really want to really just be really over-deliver and make it a really exceptional experience for whomever you are writing for. It's kind of the same thing, but on the teaching side. And one, it will make you better, which is good, and it's tough. It's the first time teaching is it's an experience. But the other thing too is that they will see that. And that will benefit you down the road. All these faculty members, they don't all know each other, but they do have networks. Like where we have networked with our colleagues, they have networks with their colleagues, and their colleagues happen to teach at whatever university, in a different state. And when they need help, hey, actually, we've got someone dropped out, and we really need someone to come teach theory. Do you have anyone who's in the area that there's a mental short list that they go through, and hopefully you want to be on that list. And the way you get on that list is by showing up and really thinking about how you present yourself in each degree. Thinking about not what's good for you in the moment, but what's good for the institution. What makes you feel more like a student versus what makes you feel more like a future colleague to your faculty members. That's really what it's for, is kind of establishing those habits. And again, it's not an overnight thing. Believe me, you are not going to walk in and teach for the first time and it's going to be, amazing and fantastic. There are going to be days that are less fun, but that's okay. So that's really what I see with it, is that it's a combination of over-delivering and just really showing that you have the habits and you have the fundamentals to be at that professional level. And you want to be showing that as early as possible. That really the end game is if you're in a doctorate, the end game ideally is going to be getting some type of academic career. You want to show everyone that you are ready for it. That's what I would say. That's the game changer that I, wish I understood better walking in on day one. So, is it all worth it. Okay, so here's the part. Here's the truth about music school. Here are the things that I think it does really well, and here are the things that I think it's really bad at. Music school is good at giving you a foundation. And that is true. Most schools are going to be pretty good at giving you a solid understanding of music theory, a solid understanding of music history, aural skills, keyboard skills, all of those sort of things. It's very good at that. It can give you different connections, different opportunities, a different network. It's very good at showing you that there are others who are better than you, and that's an important thing. Like that's a really nice thing. Many of us, like I know when my high school me was like one of the best musicians in my high school. I'm not trying to brag or anything. It was a small school, and I was really focused on it. I was easily in like the top 3. But in freshman year me, walking into college, I was very obviously the worst in the studio, like by a good country mile. And that's very helpful because sometimes we need that. We can come from, different communities and be kind of the big fish in a very small pond. And so that's something that is very good, is that you get to see like, oh man, there is a whole world of people out there that are really, really good. And that's just, that's something that's really nice that school does a very good job, with that. Music, getting a degree in music is wonderful. It's going to teach you everything that you need to know about music. But being a musician is being a business owner, right? Whether you're a performer or a composer or whatever, it's very much something that you have to run on your own, and they don't really do a good job of explaining that sort of stuff. Now, I know that this is changing. This is a changing, atmosphere, and obviously I'm painting with a broad brush here, but most schools it's going to be easier for them to teach you, theory than it is to how to properly make your website and how to like really get, how do you build like great relationships with clients, and how do you make things that, give you income, other than teaching. Sometimes it's really hard for them to sell on that. So, it's, you might find yourself questioning like, okay, like it's cool that I know second species counterpoint, but like, I don't know how to price myself in this commission. I don't know how to like write a contract for when a group reaches out to me. It's like there can be things that really get missed in this. Or, sometimes they might offer one career skills class, and it really needs to be a bigger, broader part of the program. And that's true at most places. Almost every place can admit that they need to do a little better with this. The other thing too is that no school is perfect. There are gonna be problems wherever you go. There will be different problems at different places, and some problems are better problems to have than other problems. But there's no such thing as a perfect school experience. There's gonna be negative things that happen. And that's just part of it. And the other negative thing is that a composition major is not going to lead you to a job, at least not in composition. And that's worth knowing. There's not exactly like a huge amount of composer jobs that are out there. It's really, it's kind of like a business that you run on your own. And that's a very daunting thing. People are used to the idea of like going to school and getting a credential, and then, oh, okay, there's a job out there waiting for me, and I just do that. And that's like not going to happen. The other thing is that schools are they're not helpful when it comes to financial advice and for student loans. And of course they're not, because they're schools. They want you to go and they want you to give them lots of money. They're not always going to give you the best advice on that sort of stuff, because that's not what they're incentivized to do. They're incentivized to have you graduate, so they have like a higher percentage with that. And that can be really frustrating. Is it worth it? Well, I know this is the boring answer, but it really is. It depends on who you are and what you put into it. For me, yeah, every minute of it was worth it. I loved my school. I love all three schools that I've gotten to go to. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot, and I'm a much better person because I got to go. But not everyone is, privileged enough to have that kind of experience. Some people are going to have bad experiences at school, and they might be putting their all into it. It depends on everyone and their situation. But that's it. It just depends. It's what you make of it and how you reflect on it. But is it worth it? In my opinion, I think so. For me. But it may not be worth it. Like if you have doubts about it, that's worth listening to. And I do want to be clear with this. When I'm talking about whether it's worthy or not, and you have doubts as to like whether you should do it, that might be a sign that you shouldn't do it. If you're really not sure, like if you've been watching this video and in the back of your mind you're like, maybe being an accountant is a better option, I would do that. I wouldn't do music. I wouldn't go for this. It's extremely tough to see people who get into a degree and don't really know why they are there. They don't really know what they want to do down the long run. It's one thing if you don't have like the exact idea. Like I remember I had said before that, I wanted to be, I want to be a musician, I want to be a band director because that's what I knew, and then eventually I changed. That's fine because I had the same direction. Ultimately, it was still, I wanted to do music. I want my living to come from music. But if you're not certain that music is the thing that you're going to do, you should listen to that. It is totally okay. It is totally acceptable to want to study composition and do all these things, but not feel comfortable getting a degree in it and do something else and study privately on the side. There's nothing wrong with that. That's great. In fact, I wish more people would do that. I think that's a very healthy thing to do. Like if you have those doubts, it might not be worth it for you. And you're the only one that can know that. And that's kind of the tough thing. That's kind of the scary thing about it. But if you have any serious doubts and you're really leaning on that plan B, just do that because it might not be worth the trouble. This is hard. You have to be comfortable with the idea that you want to do music. Okay, great. And you get your bachelor's in composition and maybe a master's or whatever. And you have to be comfortable with the idea that there is no job waiting for you at the end of it and that you might have to work at Starbucks the first few years, get your feet on the ground and get some clients to take off and get the ball rolling. And you have to be comfortable with that. And if you're not, this ain't for you. This is not for the faint of heart. It's not an easy thing. So I want to clarify that. I just think that people should be more honest about that sort of thing. I think that's very important. Now, that being said, the whole idea of working at Starbucks, it doesn't have to be that. I know plenty of people who work all kinds of different jobs before they find their feet with music, and that is okay. That is an uncomfortable thing that so many people do not talk about. It's actually very hard to get many professors to talk about. How did you transition from doctorate to getting that degree? There's usually this mystery area where people are like, anyway, let's talk about anything else. And they don't want to talk about that. And I feel like there's a lot of shame in that sort of world. And maybe that's an old school thing. I don't know. But I hate that. We should be able to talk about it. So just know that so many people, especially if you do get the degree or you do go for a master's degree, you do go for doctorate, that there is a transition period, that it is going to take time to land that first gig. And if you don't get it right away, that is okay. That's perfectly fine. Just know that that's very likely in your future. No composition degree has a guaranteed job waiting at the end of it. That's just the truth. That's true for all of them. Composition is a business at the end of the day. That's really what it is. And you have to know how to work with clients. You have to know who you're serving. You have to have time to build the infrastructure so that kind of income can come in. And it takes time and effort. And if you're not the kind of person who, if you're the kind of person who wants the structure to do all that, composition is probably not for you. And that is okay. That doesn't mean that you can't study it. It doesn't mean that it can't be a really fantastic hobby. I kind of, in many ways, envy people who have it as a hobby and they can just do it when they enjoy it. There is part of me there's a small part of me that's that's pretty nice. So anyway, it's just worth saying these things out loud and being very upfront about it. I think that that's very clear. If there's a part of you that's oh man, this is going to be tough, but I want to do it, that's a good mentality to have. It's okay to have some doubts. It's just if you're riddled with them, if you have more doubts than you do excitement about the prospect of actually doing it, that's worth listening to. If you have more doubts, you need to not do this. If you have a little bit of it's going to be tough, but I want to do it, then then somehow, inexplicably, it will work out. It'll be different for every single person, but it will be okay. But it's not going to make sense. So as long as you know that there's no job at the end of the tunnel, and it's going to take some time for you to bridge that gap to get there, then you will be okay. But that's the real truth.
So if I was going to do this all over again, it would be a very simple formula. For undergrad, I would really focus on following the money, even if that means going to a school that I'm not completely in love with or completely excited about. That's okay, because undergrad is about exploration. It's about trying things and discovering things and seeing what you're really good at, seeing what you like to do, and seeing what you don't like and what you don't want to do. And that can be a really, it can be a really expensive way to find out that you don't like something. So that's why I recommend following the money for that. In anything that you want to learn, you can always augment by having private lessons, whether it's, you want to learn more about film scoring, you don't have that option at your school or whatever, that's always fine. That's an acceptable thing to do. For a master's degree, I would say that it's more about being ambitious. I mean, it's nice if you can get it paid for. That's obviously like a wonderful thing. If you get an assistantship, that's lovely and that's amazing, and that's like, do that for sure. It's also okay to say, hey, you know what, if this is my year that I really go for those high level schools and I apply for it, and maybe I don't get as much scholarship, that might be more okay that for the master's degree. I think that's kind of the one that is a little more flexible. But I'd also be very open to doing something like, going to Europe, leaving your home country and going and studying somewhere else and seeing what it's like, especially if you're American, like going to somewhere like Europe or Australia or Canada or wherever. That can be like a really fascinating and eye-opening thing. I'm truthfully envious of people who have done that. For a doctorate degree, is that you're going to want to be more focused on getting the teaching assistantship and focused on that. Like if there is a degree that you want to make sure, I mean, if you can, that you get paid to go to, it's your doctorate. And usually they're the most generous when it comes to that. Generally speaking, the funding goes to the top, and doctoral degrees are kind of at the top of that. So, but that's only if you want to teach, and it's okay if you don't want to teach. Final thoughts would be, the number one thing is that you are not your degree. That's like, I've said that a couple times, but you are not your degree. Your degree is something that you earn, that you learn from, that you gain experience from, that, hopefully enriches your life and helps you attain the things that you want to do, but you aren't the degree. I'm a composer person, but I don't have an undergrad in composition because I didn't know that that's what I wanted to do at that point in my life. And that doesn't mean that you're a failure or anything like that. It means it's a gift for yourself. There's many things that being having a performance background in has been more helpful to me than a composition undergrad would be. There's a trade-off, and that's always how it's going to work. But you aren't your degree, and it is okay to change your mind. In fact, that's a very normal human thing, to change one's mind. That's understandable and normal. As everything that you do, whether it's composition or not, is going to have something to it that you really like, and it's going to have parts of the job that really suck. There are definitely things about composition that I really despise, that I'm like, I wish that this was not the thing that I had to do or deal with. That's part of the game, and it's a trade-off with what are the things that you really love and what are the things that make you feel alive. Don't go to school if you don't want to learn or if you don't want to be challenged. Like if you think that you're going to go to school and you get a degree and there's just going to be a job waiting for you and you just have to put in the bare minimum of work, it's not going to work for you. It's not going to be a good experience. Sorry, it just isn't. So, and if you're going for someone else, that's really not the way to do it. This isn't the same sort of relationship of a return on investment like traditional degrees are. Someone like a nurse or a doctor is going to go into a lot of debt, presumably, for medical school, so that they know they're going to have a high income when they get out. It's a valuable degree, and they'll be able to ride that. With musicians, it's not the same trade-off. We don't have any gigs that are waiting for us. These degrees are very flexible. They don't mean that they don't limit you. There's a lot that you can learn from it that you can transfer into different careers if that needs to be your situation. Just know that it's much more open thing. It's less binary than what schools and people in societal narrative paints it out to be. Gap years are fine. Like, don't underestimate the power of a gap year. I when I finished my master's, by many accounts should have gone straight to a doctorate, and I didn't, and I don't regret a minute of that. I needed those 6 years away from academia to really make sure that this is really what I want to do. So gap years are fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Let's reverse that narrative. Remember the fact that you can always augment things. You can always study things on your own, and that can sometimes be even more powerful. Just because you are in school and they don't offer whatever particular thing it is that you want doesn't mean that you can't study on your own, that you can't find a teacher. There's literally thousands of people online who would be willing to share their expertise with you. Don't feel like you can't do something. No school is perfect. There will be a problem with wherever you go. There's no such thing as the perfect experience. Many of us who like it, who like the schools that we go to, like I've liked every school that I go to, but I'll be very happy to admit that there's stuff that's wrong with all of them, and even the ones that I've worked at. It's just part of the deal. They're run by people. They're run by human beings. Have that expectation that like there are going to be things that you're not going to like about it that aren't perfect, but that doesn't mean that it isn't a good experience or anything like that. Really, what I see with people and what I've noticed for myself is that school can really be transformative if you understand that it is what you put into it. Like, that's the biggest thing. Like, whatever you want to get out of school is completely dependent on what you put into it. If you walk in thinking the school's going to, like, just hand you all of this stuff, I mean, it's going to give you certain things, of course, but it's about what you put into it and what you're trying to get out of. That's really where the magic comes from. If you believe in your career, you believe that you're going to do this and you're not going to be stopped, there's not a lot that you can't do. If you're really willing to put yourself into it, most of the time when we regret things, when I think about the regrets that I have in school, I don't regret the things that I did. I regret the things I didn't do. I went, man, I wish, this was really great. I wish I had done more with the theater people. I wish I had done more films. I wish I had done this, that's kind of the case, is that we regret the things that we don't do. Keep that in mind and just dive in. It's going to be extremely exhausting and tiring and completely time consuming and wonderful if you approach it that way. Ultimately, it's kind of like a side quest. It's kind of like a video game. You are getting the shiny sword or whatever, if that's how you want to think of it with your degree. It takes time. It's kind of disconnected from your main story, your main part of your life, but it can be extremely fulfilling if that's what you choose to do. So whatever you do, I'm wishing you the best of luck. School can be really amazing, and I think it can be very worth it. But just know that, like, it's largely dependent on what you put into it. So best of luck to you. I hope this is helpful. If it is, leave me a comment. What did you learn from it? What do you wish was said that I wasn't able to say in the video? Thanks so much. Best of luck. We'll see you in the next one.